Well, I think my line of questioning will be quite different, Mr. Walsworth. As you stated when you came before the members who were up for confirmation, the number one purpose of a board is to protect the public, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Let's talk about Mr. Veters. Are y'all familiar with Mr. Veters?
Yes, sir.
How many charges of sexual assault is he facing right now? 9. Is he a physical therapist?
Yes, sir.
When did y'all first start receiving complaints about Mr. Veters?
We received a complaint about Mr. Veters in 2016. Was it?
So are you talking about the licensing board? Yeah, so Ms. Harris isn't familiar with all the complaints received by the board. So prior to my coming onto the board, there was a complaint received on
and what happened with that complaint?
So I was not on that investigation. I did not work there at the time. But at that time, and Ms. Harris may be able to speak somewhat to this because she's a physical therapist. But the way that I understand it is that a complaint was received by the board and an investigation was conducted. Medical records were reviewed. Physical therapy records were reviewed. The complainant was interviewed. The licensee was interviewed. And the first determination that needed to be made was this a physical therapy technique? Because the executive director and the attorney are not physical therapists. So the physical therapist on that committee reviewed the records and determined that it was a legitimate physical therapy technique. The next question becomes, was the technique appropriate for the condition? And it was determined that when everything was reviewed, it was determined that for that condition, the technique would be appropriate. And then finally, the question would be, was it performed appropriately? And there was some concern. There was some concern that this individual should have educated the patient more, should have offered to have somebody in the room, and should have done some other things. So a letter of concern was written, and it was documented that the investigation was conducted, this was found, and that the licensee was educated to correct this action. And should anything come up in the future about this, this would establish a pattern and determine whether or not this was an isolated incident or whether this had occurred again. And so whenever a complaint came upon Mr. Veters, we reviewed the letter of concern and we used that in this complaint and Ms. Harris was on that complaint that you're referring to, I believe.
Let me be very clear, and I'm going to be as candid as I can be. Mr. Walsworth and I were both people that when the physical therapist of Louisiana were seeking to have direct interaction with patients without doctor's recommendations, we were part of the group of people that fought the orthopedist so that patients didn't have to go and get prescriptions to see physical therapists and receive physical therapy. I take allegations of sexual assault very, very, very seriously.
Yes, sir.
Very seriously. And the thing is that we, as a legislature, give boards grace in that we are convinced and believe that their job is to protect the public. I have some sexual assault victims here today, and you know that because your executive director has already been talking to them and trying to find out who's who. What concerns me, is if you thoroughly investigated someone's case, how do you not know who is who in the audience?
Okay.
Put a pin in that for a second. We give boards authority and autonomy because your primary goal is protecting the public. I'm going to invite these victims up momentarily, either during this confirmation or during the bill, I haven't decided which yet, to explain what they went through with your board and how their experience was. Your job as a board is not to look out for physical therapists, is to look out for patients. We occasionally, and we've had this fight before, we have boards that we believe are overzealous at times in their prosecution, but I will tell you, I will take an overzealous board over a board that is not doing their job any day of the week. Because an overzealous board, we can correct through legislative action. A board that's not doing their job, that's a whole different problem. But Like I said, I will hold the rest of my comments, Mr. Vice Chairman. I think that it would be appropriate to bring these victims up during the bill because I think that there's some issues in the bill that could correct this. I do want their testimony on the record, but I will tell you this much. I have grave concerns about confirming people on a board if I don't feel like the board's doing their job. I will tell you, I've worked with behavioral analysts. I've worked with boards like yours to make sure that you are not indentured servants under medical boards that tell you what to do. But today I tell you, and I'm going to hear from these victims in a second about what their experience was with your board. Because I will tell you, what really, really makes me angry is that when a sexual assault victim has the courage to contact a board and tell them they have a problem, and they are not taken seriously. That I will not stand. And if you thought that because I'm term limited, this wouldn't be a problem, I will tell you the chair of this board is 10 times worse than me. And when they tell you their experience, members who wish to be on this board, if you do not correct this action, there won't be a physical therapy board. Far as I'm concerned, you'll be a subsidy of the orthopedist board. And don't think for a second we don't do that, because we do. And if you won't do your job, we'll put you under a board that does. Like I said, I'll hold the rest of my comments till the bill comes up, because I think that's more appropriate than confirmation, because obviously the individuals here for confirmation, you're new to the board. Many of these things obviously predate you, and it's not fair to put that on you, but I will hold the rest of my comments till the bill comes up. Thank you.
Is Mr. Papali here?
No, he's not.
Okay. Is there any reason he didn't come?
We weren't aware of what this was about. Despite a request,
I'm sorry. What's your name?
My name is Courtney Newton. I'm
Okay.
their attorney.
Miss Newton.
Courtney Newton.
Okay. Did you filled out a card?
I did,
got you.
yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you so much, Senator Reiser, for a question quickly. Excuse me.
Just want to bring it back out what Senator Morrell said, that everyone that at the table is under oath.
Yes, sir.
So that is, so
Yes, sir.
you're very aware that you are under oath.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay.
Based upon the information in front of you, and maybe the other individual who wants to come up should come up about this process, because I'll tell you, I'm an attorney. Many of us up here are. I have heard of due process. This is not due process.
I'm very happy to explain.
No,
the
no,
process.
ma'am. Answer your question when I give you a question.
I'm sorry.
Okay?
I thought you called me up. My apologies.
No, I said, let me explain to you. I was a public defender. Many people up here are former district attorneys. I see Pete in the back. I wanted Pete to stay because, listen, this is, as much as I give my own DA, Leon Canizero, a hard time about some things he does, at least he takes sexual assault seriously. Because I will tell you, from what I'm hearing right now, honestly, I don't know how in the hell you can have an investigatory team looking at complaints of this nature and obviously have zero training on dealing with sexual assault victims at all. That is evident. That is absolutely evident. The nature of your profession is that you touch people, correct?
Yes, sir.
So obviously, it's in the realm of possibility that you're going to get complaints of sexual assault or sexual harassment, correct?
Yes, sir.
Does your board, does your investigators, anyone get training on how to talk to or deal with sexual assault victims?
No, we don't, sir, and we should.
For the life of me, and I'm assuming this prepare guy still works for y'all, correct?
Yes, sir.
For the life of me, how you can have a victim who is willing to go through all this crap to get to a hearing date, and you let a guy sign a damn voluntary 9-month suspension. How in the heck does a board do that when he already, according to y'all, had a previous note in his file? Your job is not to make it easy for him to get out of this, it's to protect the public. You guys came up here previously and said there was a note in his file.
Yes, sir.
And obviously you had a victim who was so dead set on trying to protect the public, no matter how you shape or describe the environment, she was willing to pull her pants down to get this guy off the street.
Yes, sir.
And this guy got a 9-month slap on the wrist. And by the way, he still has a license. It's just suspended, correct?
As of right now, yes, sir. There's an investigative process right now.
We will get to that in a second, because we have a second victim who obviously tried to also file a complaint, and you heard her testimony on how that process went. And she has plenty of documentation of her interaction with your investigator, which is hostile to say the least. Your job, this is what I meant when I said earlier about what your job is. I have dealt with enough sexual assault victims and people even charged with sexual assault. Your investigator's job is not to discount the testimony of the person calling to make the complaint. It's to investigate. And what these people have gone through just to get to your board is beyond offensive.
Yes, sir.
I'm so frustrated because realize something. I have a tremendous amount of respect for physical therapists. I have friends personally that are physical therapists. And the reason why I'm up here conflicted, Mike and I were just talking about Mr. Waldbach, because we came before the public and we passed legislation to ungate physical therapists from doctors. Do you know how this makes the legislature look? Because their argument, as you might recall, the argument of the groups that did not want to give y'all that authority was that this would happen. That when people would come to y'all for a variety of complaints, you would not be appropriately trained and you weren't as professional as they are. We look like fools. So part of my frustration is not just what these women went through. You're making the entire legislature look like idiots.
Is it true that there are 30 sexual assault cases, or is it just investigations broadly?
So those are investigations broadly, and would you like me to respond to Senator Reiser's question about the sexual assault numbers?
Sure, that'd be great.
I have those as well. So in 2018, we had 2. In 2017, we had 2. In 2016, we had 2. In 2015, we had 1. In 2014, we had 2.
Okay.
So those are related.
Those are the investigations.
No, those are so
Complaints.
of.
Yeah,
for example, yes, in 2018, of the 34 complaints received, 2 were related to sexual misconduct.
Okay, of all the complaints.
Of
And a
all the
complaint
complaints.
is defined as is just receiving a letter.
Of information.
Receipt
it
of
could
it.
be through written, oral, through the news. It's receipt of information, and it can be initiated by the board in its own receipt of information.
Okay, thank you. Senator Morrell.
Couple of points, because obviously I'm getting information as we go through this. Number one, would you be surprised to know that y'all have never revoked a single license over sexual assault allegations? I'm just asking, would you be surprised to know that in the entire history of your board, you've never revoked one license for sexual assault allegations?
I can't say I would be surprised or not, because each complaint is specific to the facts presented of that complaint.
And I'll be happy to provide some facts just for the board and for the public as to what these complaints look like. Meet Samuel Foster. In 2012, he decided to do a vaginal exam on a 25-week pregnant woman who was having hip pain and falling. She complained to the board. He was subsequently admitted, placed on 3 years probation, currently practicing. Samuel Schmidt, 2002. Mr. Papale, all these are his. Signed a consent order stating he had an appropriate relationship with a patient by kissing her during treatment. He was put on probation. After which he had subsequent complaints, and only in 2005, 4 years later, did he voluntarily return his license, which still allows him to go practice in another state, possibly, because he wasn't revoked. But let's keep going. Okay. Another complaint, 2017. Work as a physical therapist in a nursing home setting. Kissing, touching breast, upper thigh, vaginal area of nursing home patient. After being repeatedly asked to stop, he admitted to his behavior. He currently has a 1-year probation. These are all public record from your own files. 2 other individuals who, in 2006, 2007, were accused of being pedophiles, one of which is on probation, the other which is working apparently with special need kids now. So let's just be very clear. Your board has problems, has real significant problems. I think that at least we can see from our perspective as a third party looking in, the common thread right now, one common thread is Ms. Papale. I'll be very candid. I'm I'm going to work with some amendments on the floor, depending on what Mr. Moss wants to do with his bill. But I will tell you that this has risen to the level where I'm going to talk to Senator Peterson and see what else is appropriate. But I have really serious concerns that, and I will not speak to what board members know or don't know, but there is a pattern of behavior here by at least one person who seems to be the continuing thread in this, Mr. Papala, who's not here, that the idea that in a board, in a profession that has such intimate contact with people, where people put themselves in compromising positions so that you can perform and help them, the idea that people could do such horrific things, and apparently they all get probation because you don't revoke anybody. And honestly, as much as we complain about the dental board and the medical board, they revoke licenses left and right for things that are far less egregious than this. Your number one job as a board is to protect the public. That is your job, not to protect your profession. That's secondary. Obviously, as attorneys, we expect the disciplinary board to take our job seriously, discipline offenders so the public has faith in attorneys. For what it's worth, I know Mr. Tarver's not here. Most people hate attorneys in Louisiana anyway. But we need people to have faith in a board that is going to take these situations seriously. I want to ask you one legal question, a simple question. Do you have to have a criminal conviction to revoke someone's license?
No, but you have to be able to prove it with evidence to get through the hearing.
Well, if you're passing consent orders and voluntary consent orders and probations left and right, you'll have to have a hearing for that.
Well, those are used as a way to protect the public when you don't necessarily have the evidence.
You have
that you
madam, with all due respect, and I mean that in the way that we typically mean with all due respect, Mr. Reiser. With all due respect, the public is here, the people making the complaints are here, and they don't feel like they're being protected.
Yeah, we got a lot of work to do.
I defer to you, Madam Chairwoman.
You can make one, then I got a few.
Okay, no, something was brought up about the public not knowing about the board. I think it would be very good for there to be a legislature that all boards have their licensees post where the public can get information on the licensees, whether in their place of business or in their intake docs. That's strictly a public protection thing. The board has a website. We are mandated by law to put notices on where you can complain about board business on the bottom of correspondence to licensees, but there's no mandate that I'm aware of that requires you to educate the public on where they can complain. So that was simply a positive thing that the legislature may be able to do.
Yeah, I think to the point that Senator Morrell was making most recently is the issue of the hearing, right? And so if you the provision that says that being found guilty of unprofessional conduct of sexual assault is one of the disciplinary actions, right, which would subject someone to suspension or revocation. You're familiar with that, right?
Or limitation, yes.
Or limitation, right? Mm-hmm. So what you're saying, I think I heard you say, and clarify it if I'm not accurate, is that, sometimes the evidence doesn't exist. We do consent decrees. That's what comes before the board. But in order to get to this, wouldn't you need a hearing in order to be found guilty, correct?
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. What is this?
This meaning 2420, disciplinary actions and revocation.
No, a formal adjudication can either be done through a consent order or through an actual hearing. Both are considered adjudications of the board.
Okay, so you could actually revoke through consent decree.
When Senator Morrell said a voluntary surrender of license, that is essentially a public record. That's a consent decree in a way that we get a licensee to give up their license and make it public.
And you've done
record.
that in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's an option. That's something in your toolbox.
A couple of points. The first one is, as of currently, there are 2 additional complaints pending against Mr. Veters, correct?
Correct.
However, just from the article, which is public record, there are 9 people have come forward to the district attorney saying they were sexually assaulted by a physical therapist. What prevents you from contacting the district attorney's office and working with them to find out who the other victims are?
I can speak to that. We have spoken to the district attorney's office. We've received a list, and we've asked them if they've spoken to each of the victims, informing them about the licensing board and encouraging them to file a complaint, and they have.
Okay, so what you're saying is you have 2 complaints. Are there other ones possibly pending?
Possibly,
Pending.
yes.
Okay. Obviously, when Mr. Veters was under suspension, you had this news happen, and I understand you said that it's tricky to extend or do a summary suspension. I have dealt in the administrative law field previously, and it's very difficult. But I find it kind of incredulous that in a situation like this one, you don't think you could begin a summary proceeding based upon the information in front of you, which easily meets the criteria under the law of disciplinary actions. I don't see how, based upon what you're hearing, waiting is an option. I think right now the challenge you guys have as a board and as a profession, and I'm being deathly serious here, is that as it continues to be perpetuated that a person who's under 9 counts of sexual assault charges is under probation with the board, that's a problem.
He's suspended.
Sorry, he's suspended. He has a license to be a physical therapist in the state of Louisiana. Is that correct?
Yes, but that's what a summary suspension is as well.
Okay. I think sometimes I'm saying things. This is not a law school exam. And I appreciate your very law school answers. Let me speak to the physical therapist, because obviously your lawyer is not getting what I'm saying. People are reading the paper, and they are seeing that a guy who has 9 counts of sexual assault is under suspension for 9 months, 4 or 5 of which has passed, correct?
Correct.
How do you think prospective patients are going to look at that while a DA is pursuing 9 counts of sexual assault, the board that regulates him, which has a lower threshold to revoke a license, has chosen to suspend him?
I do hear what you're saying.
And
I think what you're saying is that the board could summarily suspend his license to expedite a hearing. So the board could hear the matter.
I think the board has a lot of options of that. You have at least Ms. Walker, who's here right here today, who has a pending complaint. There is no reason why you cannot expedite her complaint, which thus far, I will tell you, and I didn't get a chance to address it, and I'm sorry, Ms. Walker, I want to say it now. The idea that Ms. Papale asked her for her damn mental health records, you don't have to be a trained sexual assault advocate like Morgan is to know that is crazy. That is crazy. To ask someone, to tell someone who's a victim who made their complaint before the paper article broke, to tell them they need to produce their mental health records to prove they're not seeking fame or fortune. By the way, fame or fortune for a sexual assault, that in itself is ridiculous.
So let me, can I jump in for just a second?
Go right ahead.
Who holds the investigator, Mr. Papali, accountable? Who does he answer to?
He answers to the board.
Okay, so the board talks directly to, the board members talk directly to Mr. Papali?
Yes.
If there's a complaint against Mr. Papali, who would decide whether or not he should stay on?
And that is definitely to consider in the future. We're going to have to.
Like how
the
soon in the
boards,
future?
Like very soon.
Like, what do you mean, like 24 hours?
Like outside the door.
Like outside the
We
door,
have-
yeah.
we have- we're-
Because what I heard is that he's been around for 18 years, and maybe, I'm sure he's done a lot of good things over that time frame, but he may be a little outdated with the things that are happening right now, right? And certainly don't want to discriminate based on age. I just had a conversation about that earlier, right?
Yeah.
We need seasoning around, but we need people who are also trained to adequately do the kind, in his role as a lawyer and an investigator, to do, they need to be trained. And so if there was no RFP, if he was just hired to do something, and it seems like he was pulled in to serve in a role that may not be perfectly fit for what is needed from the board right now, that is an immediate consideration that this board should deal with.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
I'm Charlotte Martin. I'm the Executive Director of the Louisiana Physical Therapy Board. At the last meeting, I misspoke to the committee, and I want to clarify to you all. I do not have a list from the district attorney. The district attorney, Mr. Moore, cannot by law give names of survivors who come forward. Mr. Moore did agree to send correspondence on our behalf to the survivors who have come forward. I do have this correspondence available to the committee if you'd like to review it, but it is a letter letting them know that we exist, our purpose, and how to report. We've also reviewed many training options for the board. We're looking at immediate training options in the near future. We still do have open investigations right now, and we realize the importance of communicating with the individuals who have come forward to our board. And also, we need to understand the psychology of trauma and all that goes with that. So we are reviewing training right now, and we do plan to have that completed in the near future. And then also through orientation for our board members, our staff, and other representatives who work on investigations during orientation and for annual training opportunities. This is an incredibly important issue for this board. They take the concerns of this committee very seriously. And I want to let you know that we're here. We appreciate the opportunity to be here and answer your questions today. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Senator Walsworth, for a question. We have Mr. George Papali, who is present, and he would like to speak. Go ahead, Mr. Senator Walsworth.
I was just trying to listen to, and you talked about the training and orientation and annual. When is orientation, when is annual, and when is like next week?
Yes. So
Can you sort of, I think there's a need for immediate training, not just annual and orientation.
and I agree with you.
Okay.
So whenever I was speaking of orientation, I was speaking of for new board
For
members.
new board members.
Yes, any new attorneys, new staff, anybody would need orientation as well as an annual ongoing training. I do have, there are 2 live opportunities that we have been in contact with one of the advocacy groups who said that there's one in Baton Rouge and New Orleans in June, and our board member who is on the investigation right now is in New Orleans. So we are trying to find other opportunities that are more immediate as well. We've read articles on this information as well, but we are definitely in agreement with you that moving forward quickly on the training is important. And we've been in contact as well with an organization that has been looking at customizing a training for us that would be focused on disclosure of survivors and how that disclosure occurs, as well as the psychological process of trauma so that we can understand, and then sensitivity and communication. And they said that they can customize it for us and we can work with them. So I have all of that information here if you'd like to see it, but I don't know how detailed you want to get.
What kind of fund balance do you have right now in the board? Does the board have, let's just say, in a roundabout, I mean, you don't have to give me an exact number, but your fund balance, how much money do you have in the bank?
On our operating?
Yeah, I mean, how much money do you have, does the board have in the bank? You don't have any money in the bank?
No, the board is financially
Stable. Can you tell us how much money you have in the bank?
Yes, the board has. I'm trying to think of this just the end of renewals. About $1 million in the bank.
Okay.
Approximately.
And how much is your annual expenses, give or take?
Approximately $600,000.
All right. So where I'm going with this is, tells me you got about $400,000 that you could use, and you can find somebody to do the training immediately.
Yes.
Okay. That's okay.
Yes.
Immediately, not in a few months. Please. I think it's very important that you do that immediately. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Walsworth. Yeah, and I totally agree that you all should work and identify a professional that has the appropriate expertise to be able to quickly, considering what has occurred and the pending investigations, that you have someone that can complement your new legal counsel in you.
That has been something that we've pressed in meetings also, myself, because this has to happen now.
Right.
I understand that there is a history, but we also have to look forward with this
Of
board,
course.
and they have to move quickly. And that's from me, because I'm sitting here with this bill.
Yeah,
And
thank
something
you.
has to be done. And as I told them, this is not over, because next year I'll be back amending something else on this.
Yeah,
Because
well-
we're not going to be perfect coming off the start with this. The board isn't, but we plan on working through it, Madam.
Look, and Representative Moss, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your leadership on this and your just fluid being able to evolve with everything that we learned in a short period of time.
Yes, ma'am.
And you too, ladies, and the leadership that you've shown in the chair. So I would just encourage you, because I understand that the board has emergency powers and that it may be urgent. This could rise to the level of some urgency to be able to move forward quickly. And to Senator Walsworth's point, you have the resources available clearly.
Ma'am, they do.
And so there really should not be an excuse to quickly evaluate, different experts that can help you. There are no further questions. I want to permit, if you would permit Mr. Papali to come to the table. Mr. Papali, and welcome, sir.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
thank you, and I appreciate this opportunity to be here and speak. And Senator Carter, let
me, before you get started, we are on House Bill 368, and I know there was some communications with our staff, but this is with respect to the Physical Therapy Board, and I just want to make sure we stay on message here.
with
Okay.
respect,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
yes, I do want to use this opportunity briefly to speak to the meeting last May 15th. Senator Carter, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank you for your honoring the military of this country, and to tell you that I had served this country as an officer in the United States Army, a year of which was in Vietnam. I heard about the activities in this committee on the 15th. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair. In my estimation, the committee, in effect, ambushed this board that I have worked with for 16 years in a way that I believe undermines this board's ability to protect the public. And at the same time, I believe this committee, perhaps unwittingly, unlawfully interfered in an active investigation and a prosecution. At no time did this committee contact me or request that I be present.
Okay, so let me be clear about what we're doing right now.
All right.
When you asked if you needed to appear because of what had transpired, we told you no. We are talking right now about House Bill 368, which deals with the Physical Therapy Board, and it talks about to determine and collect at the time of new licensure renewal, core set of data elements. And if you want to talk about that, we can talk about that right now. But if you want to talk about something else that already transpired in this committee that's unrelated to this right here, then this is not the place for it. We are not doing.
Can I speak, Madam Chair?
You can speak to this.
How about an amendment to that bill?
If you have an amendment to this bill,
Yes.
you are not a member of the committee. You would have to have one of us offer it.
All right, so I'm done.
No, but you can speak to what you
Well,
would want to amend, and then a member can offer it for you. That is not a problem. So
With all due respect, Madam Chair,
okay.
I have great affinity for this board, notwithstanding what happened to me on the 16th of May.
Okay.
Okay. I support the bill. Anything that would happen, help out my former client, I would wholeheartedly endorse.
Okay.
And my heart and spirit is still with them. I will take this opportunity then to say that what my remarks that I will have will be prepared in a letter detailed to this committee,
Okay.
fully documented. I will send one to the Senate President
Sure.
and to the press, and I thank you for this opportunity.
And Senator Morrell, I would like to.
Thank you. Mr. Papali, if you would. Well, actually, you can go sit down. Whatever you want to do. I find it very interesting today that at the very least, this committee affords you the opportunity to come speak and to be present. And that the irony is that part of the reason why we had that meeting last week is because there were victims who wanted a hearing and were denied that ability to have one.
That is not true, Senator. And I will make that abundantly clear in my response.
I appreciate that. I appreciate your response. And I appreciate the fact that when you sign a consent agreement without a victim's consent and you do not allow them to go to a hearing, we gave you more today than you gave them. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Senator.